A very good morning, evening to the students of class 7 who have just come in or who are watching the video. So today we are going to deal with a topic that is very much needed if we have to get on knowing more about literature topics. Alright, especially when we have to learn about poems. So in the past classes we had, in one of the past classes we had learnt about the parts of speech, right? That is pretty much related to grammatical concepts. Today we are going to deal with figures of speech. Now we have already come across certain figures of speech in class 6 when we had to do many poems and prose as well. And also when we had done the short story, A Shot in the Dark, we had talked about a few figures of speech, also a genre of the short story. So today I'm going to deal with other figures of speech along with those as well, in order to which will be easier for you to understand. Now along with this video I would also send in a Word document or a PDF format. Okay, mostly I think I'll give you in a PDF format all the figures of speech that we are going to learn in class today. Okay, so let's get started, children. The very first one that I'm going to talk about, it's pretty easy to understand as well and one of the most common. Okay, and that is, so today we are going to there are many figures of speech. Alright, there are many figures of speech. So we are just going to deal with a few, maybe 10 or 12 or maybe more, less than that or near about that amount. Okay, so we are going to deal with those. Today we will be learning the common ones. So the very first one that we will learn today is simile. Okay, now what is a simile? In simile, two unlike things are explicitly compared. Okay, so two things that are two different things. So two different things are compared. Okay, so you have, and it is always indicated by the words as, like. Okay, so example of a simile would be she's like a fairy, or as cold as ice. Okay, so I think we did this simile song in class 6. If I'm not wrong, if we have done, then you might be knowing what a simile is. Alright, so here we have as cold as ice. These are the indicating points or indicating words of a simile. If this is present, it is known as a simile. That figure of speech or that line has a simile. Okay, has a figure of speech which is a simile. Okay, the next one is also very closely related to a simile, but it is pretty much different. Alright, and that is a metaphor. A metaphor as well, we compare two elements like a like as we do it in a simile, but here the words like, as, so, these are omitted. So in metaphor you actually imply, it's like an implied simile. Okay, so in metaphor it seems to be so true that the person has, maybe it's not just compared, it has become that. For example, I'll just bring out a difference. I'll just give you an example first of the metaphor. For example, yes, so this is what I was talking about. The example, if I say he is the lion of the class, okay, he is the lion. Over here we are comparing this person to a lion, which means that in the class he's ruling out there. So nobody talks to him, nobody talks above him, or he is the one who judges people, however, like that, being very fierce, very bold, Alright, so he's the lion of the class. But in simile, what do? We would say he's as fierce as a lion. Okay, it means the same. The comparison would be the same. But the manner in which the word is constructed or how it is coming across, it is going to be different. So that is the basic difference between a metaphor and simile. But poets, I'll tell you something, they love using metaphors. Okay, and you'll be very interested to analyze a poem that has a lot of metaphors. Okay, other than the other figures of speech, metaphors are really very intriguing. So that is like one. Okay, the next one that we will be dealing with, that is another very common one and very easy to detect, easy to understand, is personification. Now, what is a personification? As the name suggests, it identifies a person. How? Now, personification is an attribution or a giving, okay, of a personal quality to a non-living object, maybe, or a living object, but not a person. Okay, that it's not a person. It can be an animal. It can be an inanimate object. It can be elements of nature. Okay, for example, we had read it in The Selfish Giant by Oscar Wilde in class 6. We talked about the wind, we talked about the hail being very fierce, alright. So the flower smiled, remember, a flower put up its head from the ground. So that is like a personification, because a person-like quality. Okay, the hail was shattering. So the hail, it cannot do that. Only a person has or a human has the right to do so. Okay, to feel, to emote, to give out an emotion. So whenever a person-like quality, for example, the sun is smiling. If we say that, the sun cannot smile. It's shining very brightly. So if somebody shines very brightly, if a person does that, so we compare the person to a sun, always comparing the sun to a person, okay? So we're giving sun a personal quality, okay, a personal nature, intelligence or character to inanimate object or abstract nouns as well. Love, knowledge, okay. So death, most of the times death is always given a person-like quality. Alright, somebody whose death is the snatcher, okay. So for example, let us say, so here, attribution of personal quality to inanimate objects. For example, let me give you this. The furious storm. The storm seems to be in a rage, furious, it's so angry. So these qualities can only be given to a person, alright, not the storm. So we just can say it was a heavy storm, or it was very, therefore it is so much instilled into our daily language that we also talk about it in this manner, alright. So the furious storm. Other than that, we also have thirsty ground, pitiless cold. Pitiless cold means the cold doesn't have pity. Okay, it's not merciful enough. So here we have these. Now, other than that, let us move on. Okay, the next one that we are going to learn about is so an alliteration. An alliteration is the repetition of the consonant sound or a syllable at the beginning of two or more words. Okay. Repetition of the Okay, so alliteration over here is the repetition of the same consonant sounds. Okay, and where are these going to occur? In the adjacent lines of a poem. Okay, or a prose work, or mostly it happens in a poem. In the adjacent lines, okay, of the poem. For example, sweet birds sang. Example, sweet birds sang. For example, if you have another, if there was a sound with sh, even though it started with s, I wouldn't consider it to be a part of this. I wouldn't consider sh to be an alliteration because it sounds different. So you always have to focus on the consonant sound and not the consonant or not the letter. Alright. So for example, photo frame. That is an alliteration. Even though the spellings are different, the consonant sound is the same. Photo frame. PHO, and that is F. So even though it is different, it will be an alliteration because the consonant sound is the same. Okay, now I think you have already come across all of these figures of speech. I think more are there. I'm going to get them after I rub the board. So these are the 4 most common figures of speech that we have come across, okay, till now. Alright, now we shall move on. The next one that we are going to deal with is imagery. Now, as this name suggests, it talks about some kind of image. So, imagery is when used in poems and in prose as well. They refer to as descriptive images. Okay. As I would like to call them, pictures in words. Okay. Word pictures also can be used to describe the term imagery. Okay, word pictures. So descriptive images where an image, a visual image forms in front of your eyes. Okay, a moving image, alright, not a still one. A moving image, it comes in front of your eyes, or very vivid description. That is known as an imagery. Okay. So it as a literary device, it consists of descriptive language that can function as a way for the reader to better imagine the world of the piece of literature. Whatever is written in the literative piece or in the literary piece, so that can be better imagined with these words. Okay, it also adds a lot of body to the work. And imagery draws on the 5 senses. So it includes your 5 senses. So you have to keep that in mind. What are the things that you have to keep in mind? The descriptive image, the word pictures, picture forming in front of your eyes, and your 5 senses. It might take into account your taste, either your sound or the sight or smell, any of the 5 senses that are being taken into consideration. Alright. So for example, if I say for the taste, the familiar tang of his grandmother's cranberry sauce. Okay, I'll just give you one example and I'll say the rest. I'll put that in the PDF text. Okay, the familiar tang of cranberry sauce. Okay, just omitted grandmother's. So familiar tang of cranberry sauce of grandmother's cranberry sauce took him back to his youth. Or for touch, if I say the tree bark was rough against his skin. So some kind of sense is being understood by imagery. So that is by the words, some kind of sense, some kind of image is forming in front of your eyes. That is your imagery. Now, why was imagery used? It is mostly because the authors or playwrights or the literary people, they wanted to set the mood for the story or for the content that was to come. Okay, so any sort of opening, any beginning, it was always started off with an imagery. And for poems, it is abound in imageries, because it always, modern poems are they always consist of imageries. All right. Now, with imagery, there is another figure of speech that is very closely related to an imagery, and that is symbolism. All right. Symbolism is where an object is being used. Okay. An object, it might be anything, any object is used. Okay. And why it is used? It is with a certain meaning. It is to give and given a certain meaning. Okay. Given a certain meaning to that object. It does not have the literal sense. The object acts as a symbol, maybe for a feeling, maybe for a person. It acts as a symbol, maybe for an idea. So that is known as symbolism, when an object is given some sort of a meaning, okay, which is different from their original meaning, which is different from the literal meaning of the object. So that symbolism is used. For example, the color black is used for death, to mean darkness. So black is like a symbol for death, for darkness. Other than black, there are other objects also that might mean darkness. For example, in the Selfish Giant, we found winter, okay, to be a symbol for hatred, to be a symbol for being selfish. So winter is associated with that. So that is a symbolism. So moving on, the next one that we are going to learn about is onomatopoeia. It's not poia, it's onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is the formation of a word. Okay, it's a word formation whose sound is made to suggest or echo, as in the spelling. Okay, it echoes. It echoes with the spelling of the word. Alright, for example, cuckoo. The word cuckoo makes the same sound. So that is like an onomatopoeia. For example, raindrops, pitter patter. Onomatopoeia. Okay. For example, hiss of the snake. So that is also like the onomatopoeia. It echoes with the spelling, which the sound pattern will be the same as you spell it. Okay. So that is it. How the object is, or how is it, the sound pattern is also the same. So that is your onomatopoeia. So we'll move on to the next one. I think we just did a tad bit of oxymoron, or we came across it when we were doing A Shot in the Dark. I talked about Saki's other story about the storyteller, where the girl Bertha was called to be terribly good. Okay, so as suggested, oxymoron is a figure of speech. All right. And what does it do? It's a figure of speech that combines So it combines contradictory words or ideas together, which is presented together. All right. For example, you often must have heard this term dim light, which means a light which does not have that much power and it's not so bright. Okay, not so bright. The light was not so bright. So it is known as dim light. Now, dim out here, it means darkness. So, dim light, this word, it's very common to us in usage, but it is an oxymoron. So is terribly good. Alright. So, just like Saki had used in his other story, the storyteller, terribly good. The person is terrible is so good that the other persons feel terrible. So I told you oxymorons were always used in order to show the contradictory or the conflicting element of nature. That nature is so conflicting at times. Human ideas, human nature, or maybe other elements, they are so conflicting at times. So in order to show that, Saki had used this oxymoron, and so does the other authors also. Now we shall move on to the next bit. There are there are others also to learn about, so we'll get on with that. The next one that I will explain is metonymy. Now this is something that is very new to you, and what happens is it might feel difficult, or metonymy, but the thing is that it is so very instilled in our daily language that we don't get to understand that yes, this is a figure of speech. But we have to identify them, right? And to identify, we need to learn them. So here we are with metonymy. Now, what is a metonymy? Simply, it's a figure of speech in which something is given a new name. So what you have to remember, the new name that is given. Okay, a new name. And what is that new name? That is related in meaning to the original thing or concept. So it has to be related to the original thing. I'll give you an example and it will be very easy. I'll give you an example and it will be very easy for you to understand. So a metonymy is a new name given to an idea or something, however, okay, which has to be related to the original thing or meaning of the original thing. For example, let me tell you, Hollywood is obsessed with this diet, which means that the people of Hollywood, it doesn't mean Hollywood in general, okay? The film industry, not in general, but Hollywood, the people, the celebrities who are working there. Alright, so the celebrity, the fraternity is just reduced to one name, a new name, which is Hollywood. So this is the metonymy. Hollywood is obsessed with this diet. So many other things, there are other things also that can be examples of metonymy. For example, if a person lives in a big house, he might refer to that as a prison. This prison, okay? So at times we have heard this proverb, the pen is mightier than the sword. Alright, the pen. The pen means which symbolizes or which is a symbol. This is also a symbol, right? So, which is a metonymy for the art of writing, sword which is fighting. So, that can also be the metonymy. The crown. If you always talk about the crown, that means it's a royal person. A king. At times we take the decision is taken by the crown. At times we also say the decision is taken by the government, which means the people over there. Okay, so that is a metonymy for you. Alright, the last one that I'm going to do for today is epigram. Okay. Now, why epigrams? Epigrams can also be created by you. Alright. So these have a very close connection with idioms. You already know about idioms, so I haven't brought that into consideration. So epigram is a pointed saying, like you're pointing towards something. Whenever you're saying something, you are pointing towards it. So it has to be brief, okay, and pointed saying. A brief and pointed saying that it couples words which apparently contradict each other. There has to be a contradiction. So this is like the third figure of speech where contradiction, no, fourth, sorry, oxymoron is also there. Contradiction is used. So it has to be in that word, it has to be a contradiction, okay. And the language of the epigram is remarkable for its brevity. It's like in a word or in a sentence, you are expressing the entire idea. Okay, you're expressing the entire idea. For example, William Wordsworth once wrote, okay, now epigrams are very wise sayings. So it's very proverbial as well, but those are not proverbs. It is proverbial in nature. So proverb means which gives you some sort of wisdom, some sort of inspiration, you learn something. Now this example written by William Wordsworth in a poem, "The child is the father of man." What does it mean? This is a proverbial phrase because it teaches you something. Okay, at the same time it has this contradiction. Okay, how can a child be the father of man? Well, it simply means that the true nature of a person doesn't change with age. Alright, this is one thing. It can also mean whatever is taught in childhood, a person doesn't forget when he's a man or when he grows up. Okay, so that in that way the child is the father of man. So he comes before, it teaches the man something. Whatever was taught in the childhood, it stays with the man. Okay, and also it means that the conduct of a child, it indicates what will he become when he grows up. So three things can mean from this. So that is why this is a brief pointed saying that gives some sort of wisdom. However, this epigram over here, it is also paradoxical. That is another figure of speech. It just means contrast. Okay, paradox, which means two opposite things coming together. Not an oxymoron. Oxymoron is where two words should be there. It's compound. But here it's a phrase. So this is known as an epigram. You can also create your own epigrams, proverbials. I think when I had taken this, when I used to take these classes, you know, literary clubs, I had taught the children who used to come over there to create epigrams. I don't know, maybe some of you must have remembered. I'm not sure of it. If one of you or two of you, maybe they were in the higher classes. So that is it, epigrams. So we ended over here. Other than all these figures of speech that we have studied, I'm going to give you the ones that I had taught in short in the dark. I will not explain them right now because I've already done so. So we will include all that here. So we have pun. We learnt about exaggeration. We learnt about humor. Irony or sarcasm. But satire is not a figure of speech because it's a genre of poetry, a genre of story, a genre of literature. Okay, just like romantic poetry, just like medieval Victorian poetry, satire is also that a genre. Okay. So a tragedy, satire is the same. So these will also be included in your PDF text. And so we end our lesson right now over here. I hope we have learned as much as we can regarding the figures of speech, because I'm going to do a poem next with y'all, and there you will find many figures of speech from the list that I have given to you today. So it's better that we learn them, and a worksheet will also be given to you in which you have to determine what the figures of speech are. I'll give you a few lines, or maybe I'll just quote the lines. I'll give you phrases, so you have to determine what the figures of speech are. Okay, thank you.